Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a philosophical puzzle that has literally stumped the greatest thinkers for millennia. We are diving deep into divine command theory. We'll be unpacking ancient traps and looking at some brilliant historical solutions, strictly using our source material to break down these huge concepts together. Let's get right into it. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by defining divine command theory. Then we'll move right into the famous Euthyphro dilemma, look at solving that Socratic trap, and finally, we'll cross the natural law bridge. Now, before we actually tackle the heavy theology, I want to ask you a really foundational question about the everyday language we use when we talk about ethics. Think about it. We use the phrase duty-bound all the time, right? Like, I can't hang out tonight because I'm duty-bound to help a friend move. But what does it actually mean to be bound to a moral choice? Well, look at the word obligation. It has this fascinating etymological link to being literally tied to a standard, which perfectly sets up our main topic. The Latin root term is ligare, which literally means to bind. So when we talk about having a moral obligation, it intrinsically makes sense that we associate it with being tethered to some sort of definitive, ultimate standard. So that brings us to Section 1, Divine Command Theory Defined. What exactly is it? At its core, divine command theory boils down to the view that particular actions are right or wrong simply because God says so, period. From the broadest life principles down to highly specific situational case laws, God's commands act as that ultimate binding standard. The logic is straightforward. Because God issues a command, we are obligated or bound to obey. Notice how our source text here highlights that scriptures contain scores of these commands that tell followers exactly how they should live, cementing this as an incredibly popular lens for ethical decision-making. We're talking about everything from abstract principles like loving your neighbor to highly concrete, situational rules you'd find in texts like Leviticus. For millions of believers, the very first impulse when facing any moral dilemma, whether that's about modern medical ethics or the justice system, is to look straight at the scripture to see what God has instructed. But what happens when that framework gets pushed back on? That brings us to Section 2, the Euthyphro dilemma. This is the ancient trap. To really understand the pushback here, we have to look at Plato's famous dialogue. In it, a man named Euthyphro boldly claims to know exactly what is good and pious, while he is in the middle of prosecuting his own dad. Socrates runs into Euthyphro outside a magistrate's hall and is honestly stunned to hear this. He essentially thinks, wow, you must have an incredibly acute, razor-sharp sense of right and wrong to literally bring criminal charges against your own father. The backstory here is practically a true crime drama. It involves a whole cycle of murder, which Socrates uses to test Euthyphro's strict, unwavering definition of goodness. Euthyphro's father had actually captured a servant who had killed another servant. He bound the man and threw him in a ditch while going to get help, but the servant died in the ditch. Socrates takes this incredibly intense situation and leverages it to ask Euthyphro for a rock-solid, foolproof definition of what piety and goodness actually are. And this is where Socrates springs the trap. If we adapt his logic to a monotheistic context, it basically locks you between two seemingly impossible options. You have to choose. Does God command an action because it is already good, or is an action good purely because God commands it? Let's look at the source text outlining the devastating logical implications here. If you pick the left side, the implication is that goodness exists entirely independently of God. Think about that. If God commands things because they are already good, then there's a standard of goodness above God. And that is a massive problem for anyone defending this theory because conceding a higher moral authority defeats divine command theory right from the start. Okay, so what if you pick the right side? Well, as some Islamic theological traditions do with a concept called voluntarism, you face a different, equally difficult logical implication. If the sheer act of commanding something is what makes it righteous, God could hypothetically arbitrarily command things we find horrific, and they would technically be good. Under this framework, God could command torture or abuse. Now, believers would absolutely argue he wouldn't do this, but the logical framework itself makes morality seem, well, completely arbitrary. Clearly, both of those choices look like unsavory ones. So let's explore how major philosophers attempt to unlock this puzzle in Section 3, Solving the Socratic Trap. Contemporary philosopher Richard Swinburne tries to rescue the theory by splitting the difference. He argues that necessary truths, like the concept of acting justly, are inherently good across all worlds, but contingent truths, like paying a specific debt to a specific person, only become good because God commands them in our specific life circumstances. It's an interesting way to try and escape the trap by dividing morality into two distinct context-dependent categories. Now, what's really interesting here is that the author of our source material much prefers a different intellectual key. As you can see, the text moves us away from Swinburne's divided approach, finding it a bit lacking, and instead points us to a much more elegant solution from one of history's greatest thinkers, Thomas Aquinas. So, the absolutely crucial point of the Thomistic solution is that God doesn't just arbitrarily invent goodness out of thin air. Rather, his very eternal nature is the ultimate standard, and his commands simply apply that nature. To put it simply, God doesn't command us not to murder arbitrarily. He commands it because he literally is life. The commands are epistemological, which is just a fancy way of saying they inform us of moral truth. They are tools for us to know and understand God's eternal character, rather than arbitrary rules he just made up. This brings us right to our final section, bridging the gap between divine commands and innate human understanding. Section 4, the natural law bridge. Catholic philosopher Peter Geach takes this whole concept a step further. He argues that we actually bring our own moral intuitions to the table to evaluate whether Scripture is truly from God in the first place. He states that before we even accept any text as divine revelation, we have to evaluate it philosophically, in moral terms, to recognize if it's even a plausible communication from a good God. This is a real game changer. Geach argues by recognizing the utter horror of acts like lying or infanticide is actually a built-in awareness of divine law, and that holds true even for someone who doesn't believe in God at all. Basically, some profound moral knowledge has to exist entirely independent of our knowledge of God. Let's look at how this builds into the broader concept of natural law. It suggests that an independent, innate, moral framework is written on our hearts long before we ever crack open a sacred text. Because we possess this innate awareness of basic right and wrong, that awareness acts as the very moral framework we bring to Scripture. We use it to assess right from wrong intuitively. So I'm going to leave you with a final, provocative thought to ponder regarding your own moral compass, and it perfectly sets the stage for our next explainer. If an innate moral law is truly written on our hearts, if you possess this internal framework that allows you to judge what is good and bad, completely independent of a specific religious command, where exactly do those foundational intuitions come from? How did they get there? Think about that the next time you feel duty-bound to do the right thing. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep questioning.